They sold us a dream called Old Hollywood. Perfect faces under perfect lights, velvet gowns sliding across red carpets, love stories that always hit their mark. But behind the glow was a rule nobody advertised. These women did not fully own their lives, and they definitely did not own their bodies. The studios did. A single pregnancy could shatter a carefully built image, burn a fortune in marketing, ruin the illusion of the forever young, forever available star. So, when the test came back positive, the choice often wasn't really a choice at all. Under fake names, in quiet clinics, some of the most famous women on earth were told the same thing. If you want to save your career, the baby cannot stay. Tonight, we're talking about the pregnancies Hollywood tried to erase. Judy Garland is the perfect example of how a studio could take a little girl with a big voice and slowly convince her that everything she had, including her body, belonged to them. We remember her as Dorothy, chasing rainbows in The Wizard of Oz, but by the time the world fell in love with that character, MGM had already begun reshaping Judy into something they could sell. They put her on strict diets, called her fat to her face, fed her pills to keep her awake, more pills to knock her out, then asked why she looked tired. So, when Judy married composer David Rose and soon found herself pregnant, it wasn't met with congratulations and nursery plans. It was met with panic. MGM had invested a fortune in selling Judy as the eternally youthful, eternally innocent girl. A baby didn't just clash with that image, it threatened the entire brand. According to multiple biographers, Judy was strongly pressured by her own mother, by her husband, and by the studio machine around her to get rid of the pregnancy. She was young, exhausted, and already conditioned to do what the adults in power told her was best for her career. So, she went along. Quiet hospital, quiet paperwork, quiet return to work as if nothing had happened. Some accounts suggest it happened more than once, and that's the most chilling part. When your paycheck, your future, your entire identity depend on staying in line, a decision like that doesn't feel free. The public saw a smiling girl singing about somewhere over the rainbow. What they didn't see was the teenager who walked into a clinic with a baby and walked out with a secret. Because the studio had decided the world wasn't allowed to know she was a woman. Jean Harlow. Before Marilyn Monroe ever stepped in front of a camera, Jean Harlow defined what a Hollywood blonde bombshell looked like. Platinum hair, wicked smile, a little bit of danger in every glance. On screen, she seemed untouchable, the woman who broke all the rules and still got the last laugh. Off screen, she lived in a world where the rules were written by other people. After her husband Paul Byrne died, under strange and still unsettled circumstances, Harlow's life grew even more complicated. She started a relationship with heavyweight boxer Max Baer, a man who, inconveniently, already had a wife and children. The tabloids smelled blood. Baer's wife threatened legal action. Then, Jean became pregnant. For MGM, this wasn't just messy gossip. It was a PR nightmare waiting to explode. Their golden sex symbol, already under suspicion after a husband's mysterious death, now carrying the child of a married man, that was the kind of scandal that could tank a career and damage the studio brand. So, according to several biographies, the solution unfolded the way it so often did in that era, quietly, clinically, and off the record. The pregnancy was ended. The story never reached the front page. Later, when Jean fell in love with actor William Powell and once again became pregnant, the script played out in an even more controlled way. This time, the accounts say she called Howard Strickling, MGM's legendary fixer, the man whose entire job was to make problems disappear. He arranged for her to be admitted to a hospital under a fake name, Mrs. Jean Carpenter. And once again, a potential child was erased in the name of damage control. Jean Harlow lit up the screen with a kind of fearless energy, but even she could not escape the unspoken rule. Your body is part of the studio's business plan. If your private life threatens the illusion wins. And the cost of keeping that fantasy alive is paid in silence. Ava Gardner. If Jean Harlow was the bombshell of the 1930s, Ava Gardner was the storm of the 1950s, the woman whose beauty made people forget what they were saying mid-sentence. MGM used her like a weapon. Posters, premieres, publicity trips, always with that face front and center. But behind the glamour and the smoky laugh was someone who understood exactly how unforgiving the studio system could be. When Ava married Frank Sinatra, it was international news. Their relationship burned bright and messy, tabloid fuel for years. Somewhere in the middle of that firestorm, while shooting Mogambo in Africa, Ava found out she was pregnant. In another world, that might have been a joyful plot twist. In this world, it was a spreadsheet problem. She knew the contracts. She knew what happened to actresses who got pregnant at the wrong time, in the wrong picture, with the wrong man. Studios could slash your salary, freeze your career, or quietly move the next big role to someone they considered less complicated. According to her own later accounts, Ava made the decision that she felt she had to make. She arranged an abortion. She didn't tell Sinatra until much later. It wasn't that she didn't want a child. It was that the equation written around her left no space for both a thriving career and a baby at that moment. The studio didn't need to send a fixer or threaten her directly. The threat was built into the system. Your value is your image, and your image is whatever we say it is. Ava Gardner chose survival in the only way she saw available. And the fact that such a choice felt inevitable says more about Hollywood than it ever will about her. Joan Crawford is the definition of a manufactured legend. She began as a dancer, then a flapper, then a full-blown movie star, reinventing herself every few years to match whatever Hollywood wanted from its women. But lurking behind that constant reinvention are persistent stories about pregnancies that never turned into babies. In the early years, when Joan was building her image as the ultimate modern woman, glamorous, independent, thrillingly available, a visible pregnancy outside the studio's carefully arranged timelines would have thrown a grenade into the fantasy. According to multiple biographers and accounts from people around her, Joan underwent a series of abortions throughout the 1920s and 1930s, often at moments when a child would have clashed with a major role or mid-rise momentum. Did the studio order it point blank? Probably not in so many words. They didn't need to. The message was everywhere. Your greatest asset is your desirability, and pregnancy makes audiences see you differently. What we know for sure is that Joan later adopted several children, by which time her fertility had become a question mark. Whether or not every whispered story is perfectly precise, the pattern is clear. A woman repeatedly trading potential motherhood for the promise of staying on top in an industry that loved her image more than it ever loved her. Joan Crawford's legacy is complicated and even dark in places, but it sits on top of a truth that applies to many stars of her era. The version of herself she sold on screen was built, brick by brick, on things the public never saw her give up. Loretta Young. The last story doesn't end in a clinic. It ends in something more twisted and, in a way, more heartbreaking. Loretta Young was Hollywood's good girl, devout Catholic, elegant, wholesome, the kind of actress studios could point to when they wanted proof they still believed in old-fashioned values. So, when she had an affair with her co-star Clark Gable during the filming of Call of the Wild, and then found out she was pregnant, the collision between her public image, her private beliefs, and the studio's needs was almost unbearable. Abortion was forbidden by her faith, publicly claiming the baby would mean admitting to an affair with a married man, destroying the pure persona that kept her working, and that, frankly, she partly agreed with. So she did something that shows just how cruel the solutions of that era could be. Loretta disappeared from Hollywood under the cover story of illness. She carried the baby in secret, gave birth far from the cameras, and then arranged for the child to be placed in an orphanage. Months later, she adopted her own daughter, presenting it to the world as a selfless act of charity. The truth remained buried for decades. The little girl grew up believing she was adopted, not knowing she was living, breathing proof of a scandal the adults around her had worked so hard to erase. Loretta Young never ended a pregnancy, but she still lived inside the same cruel logic. Your real life must bend to protect the image, no matter who gets hurt, even if that someone is your own child. In a way, her story might be the most devastating, because it shows how deeply a system can shape a person's choices even when they're trying to follow their conscience. Bette Davis was not the kind of woman anyone expected to bend. She had those famous eyes, yes, but more importantly, she had a spine of steel. She fought for better roles, fought her bosses, even took Warner Brothers to court when she felt their contracts were strangling her career. And yet, even someone as strong-willed as Bette found herself making decisions that were less about what she wanted and more about what the system demanded. Early in her career, married to Harmon Nelson, Bette became pregnant. Then it happened again. In both cases, according to biographical sources, the pregnancies ended in abortion. Nelson, insecure about her success and fixated on her earning potential, pushed the idea that having a child would derail everything they'd worked for. The larger culture around her, studios, critics, even fans, reinforced the same message. A serious actress must be available, physically and professionally, at all times. At the same time, Bette was chasing roles that would prove she wasn't just another pretty face. She wanted parts like Mildred in Of Human Bondage, characters ugly on the inside, complicated, real. These performances would demand everything from her: time, energy, total focus. Having a baby in the middle of that trajectory wasn't just personally difficult, it was professionally dangerous. So, she chose the path that kept her career intact. Years later, she would look back with a mix of pride and pain, knowing that the roles she fought for changed Hollywood, but also knowing the personal cost she had paid to play them. Bette's story shows that coercion in old Hollywood wasn't always a studio head barking orders. Sometimes it was a whole ecosystem of expectations trapping a woman between the life she might have wanted and the work she'd been told she was born to do. When we talk about old Hollywood, we love the dresses, the drama, the larger-than-life love stories. But behind every shimmering frame were contracts, clauses, and quiet threats that reached all the way into a woman's womb. Judy Garland, Jean Harlow, Ava Gardner, Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, Loretta Young. They weren't just actresses chasing fame. They were women navigating a world where their bodies were PR risks and their pregnancies were problems to be solved. Some made choices they believed would save their careers. Some had those choices made for them. All of them paid a price the audience never saw. So, the next time you watch a classic film and fall in love with the star on screen, remember, the story you're seeing is only half the truth. The other half was written in silence,